The lights in the great council chamber were bright and cold. They made everything look sharp and clean like the inside of a machine. The chamber was huge, big enough to hold 1,000 beings, but today only 12 seats were filled. Each seat was different, made for a different kind of alien body. Some were tall and narrow, others were wide and low. One looked more like a tank filled with purple liquid than a chair. Sarah Chun sat in the human chair. It was simple and plain compared to the others. Just metal and padding made for a creature that walked on 2 legs and had 2 arms. She looked small in the massive room, but she did not seem worried about it. Her hands were folded in her lap, and her eyes moved slowly from one alien to another as they spoke. The Vorthic representative was talking now. His name was something with 2. Many clicking sounds for human mouths to say, so Sarah just thought of him as Click-Click. He was 8 feet tall and covered in what looked like black metal plates. His voice came out like grinding gears when he spoke through the translation device. "The humans must be stopped," Click-Click said, his forearms moving as he talked. "They attack without honor. They destroy whole cities from space. They do not follow the rules of civilized war." Several other aliens nodded or made whatever motion their species used to show agreement. The Zeridians were crystal beings who chimed like bells when they agreed. The sound was actually pretty, Sarah thought, like wind chimes on a summer day. Back on Earth, Kethver of the Hegemony stood up next. He looked almost human, except for the blue skin and the fact that he had no hair anywhere on his body. His species was one of the oldest in the galaxy, and they acted like everyone else was just children playing games. "The humans are primitives," Kethver said in a bored voice. "They have only had space travel for 60 of their years? They will burn themselves out soon enough. Species like this always do. They fight too hard and too fast, then they collapse." Sarah made a small note on her datapad. She had been taking notes for 3 days now, writing down everything the aliens said about humans. She wrote down their names, their complaints, and their threats. She also wrote down things they probably did not want her to notice, like how many ships they had and where their important worlds were located. The debate had been going on for 72 hours now. The aliens took turns standing up and complaining about what humans had done. They talked about the attack on Kepler 442b, where human ships had dropped metal rods from orbit onto the alien military bases. They talked about the Altarian colonies, where human soldiers had fought so hard and so mean that the aliens had given up and left. They talked about other battles and other worlds, and how humans did not fight fair. Sarah knew they were right about that last part. Humans did not fight fair. But she also knew something the aliens did not seem to understand. Humans did not fight fair because fair fighting was for people who wanted to show off. Humans fought to win, and they fought to make sure their families back home stayed safe. The chamber was built to make everyone feel equal, but Sarah could see it was really built to make non-hegemony species feel small. The ceiling was so high that it disappeared into darkness above the lights. The walls were covered with symbols from every major species in the galaxy, but the hegemony symbols were bigger and placed higher than the others. A new alien stood up to speak. This one looked like a giant spider, but with only 6 legs and skin like a snake. Sarah had seen his kind before, during the war at Centauri Station. They were called the Skrenth, and they were supposed to be very smart. "The human problem is worse than you think," the Skrenth said, his voice hissing through the translator. "They do not just fight without honor. They fight without sense. Look at what they did at Ross 128. They destroyed their own ships to kill ours. What kind of creatures do that?" Sarah remembered Ross 128. It had been a hard battle. The human fleet was outnumbered 3-1. So Admiral Martinez had ordered half the ships to ram the alien vessels while the other half escaped with the civilians. It had worked, but it cost many lives. The aliens saw it as crazy. The humans saw it as necessary. "They are like a disease," another alien said. This one was from a species Sarah did not recognize. It looked like a walking tree with too many eyes. They spread from world to world, and they change everything they touch. They make the peaceful worlds into war zones. That was not exactly true. Sarah knew humans did not start fights just for fun. But when someone attacked human colonies or tried to take human worlds, humans fought back with everything they had. And humans had learned to fight very, very well. The worst part for the aliens was that humans learned from every battle. When the Vorthak used energy shields, humans built kinetic weapons. When the Altarians used stealth ships, humans developed better sensors. When the Zeridians tried to jam human communications, humans switched to quantum entanglement networks that could not be blocked. Every time the aliens thought they had humans figured out, humans changed their tactics. Every time the aliens thought they had won, humans came back with something new and unexpected. Council Prime Yathara had not spoken yet. She was from the eldest, the first species to reach the stars. Her people looked like tall, thin humans, with gray skin and huge black eyes. They were supposed to be very wise and very old. The eldest had been watching the galaxy for thousands of years, and they rarely got involved in wars between younger species, but now Yathara was leaning forward in her chair, and Sarah could see she was worried. The eldest did not worry about much, which meant the human situation was bigger than most of the other aliens realized. The humans have been expanding for 3 cycles now, Yathara said finally. Her voice was soft but clear. In that time, they have taken control of 47 worlds. They did not ask permission. They did not negotiate. They simply took what they wanted. Because they are savages, Click Click said, his metal plates clanking as he moved. They understand only force. Sarah almost smiled at that. If only he knew how wrong he was. Humans understood force very well, but they understood other things too. They understood fear and hope and love and desperation. They understood what it meant to fight for something that mattered more than your own life. The aliens kept talking, but Sarah stopped listening to the words and started listening to the tone. She could hear the anger and the fear in their voices. They were scared of humanity, but they were also proud. They did not want to admit that a young species could be stronger than they were. That was their first mistake. Humans were not stronger than the aliens. Not individually, anyway. But humans were more willing to pay the price for victory. When aliens fought, they fought to win with the least cost to themselves. When humans fought, they fought to make sure. The enemy never wanted to fight them again. The debate continued as Sarah watched and listened and took notes. She had not said a word in 3 days, but that was fine. She was learning things that would be very useful. When she finally did speak, the other species seemed to think her silence meant she was afraid or confused. They were wrong about that too. Sarah Chun had been a diplomat for 15 years and a soldier for 10 years before that. She knew when to talk and when to listen. Right now, it was time to listen. Soon, it would be time to talk. And when that time came, Sarah was going to say something that would change everything. The 4th day of the council meeting began differently. Sarah could feel it as soon as she walked into the chamber. The aliens were no longer just angry or afraid. Now they were determined. They had made up their minds about what to do with humanity. Council Prime Yathara stood at the center podium, her tall gray form casting long shadows under the bright lights. Her black eyes swept across the chamber, looking at each representative in turn. When her gaze reached Sarah, it lingered, for a moment longer than the others. "We have talked for many days," Yathara said. Her soft voice carried clearly through the translation systems. "We have heard the evidence. We have discussed the options. Now it is time to decide what the galaxy will do about the human problem." Sarah kept her face calm, but inside she was ready. She had been waiting for this moment. Her datapad contained everything she needed to know about each species in the room. Their military strength, their important worlds, their trade routes, their weaknesses. Information that had taken human intelligence years to gather. The Vorthak representative, Click Click, was the first to speak. He stood up with a loud clanking of his metal plates and raised all 4 of his arms. "The decision is simple," he said, his voice grinding like broken machinery. "Humanity must stop its expansion immediately. They must give back the worlds they have taken. They must pay for the damage they have caused. And they must accept galactic law and galactic justice. The crystal beings called Zeridians chimed their agreement. The sound was beautiful, like church bells, but Sarah knew what it meant. They wanted humanity to surrender completely. Kethver of the hegemony nodded his blue, hairless head. The humans must learn their place in the galactic order. They are young and foolish, but they can be taught. Once they understand that they cannot win against the combined forces of civilization, they will become peaceful. Sarah almost laughed at that. The aliens still did not understand humans at all. They thought humans fought because they were young and stupid. They thought humans would give up when faced with a bigger enemy. They had no idea how wrong they were. A new voice joined the conversation. It belonged to Ambassador Threx of the Mantoid Confederacy. The Mantoids looked like giant praying mantises, but with smooth skin instead of shells. Threx was 7 feet tall, and his head moved in quick bird-like motions when he talked. "We have evidence of human war crimes," Threx said, his translator, making his voice sound sharp and angry. At Kepler 442b they dropped kinetic weapons on civilian areas. Thousands died. At the Altarian colonies they used chemical weapons against non-combatants. At Ross 128 they destroyed medical ships along with military ones. Sarah knew those charges were false, but she also knew the aliens believed them. The truth was more complicated. At Kepler 442b, humans had targeted only military installations. But the aliens had built their bases next to cities to use civilians as shields. At the Altarian colonies, humans had used tear gas to clear buildings without killing anyone. But the aliens called any chemical weapon illegal. At Ross 128, the ships the aliens called medical vessels had been carrying weapons and troops, but Sarah did not say any of this. Not yet. She just made another note on her datapad and kept listening. The spider-like strength representative spoke next. The humans do not follow the Galactic Convention on Warfare. They target infrastructure. They attack supply lines. They use tactics that are designed to cause maximum disruption rather than minimum casualties. That part was true, Sarah knew. Humans did fight to disrupt and destroy the enemy's ability to make war. They attacked power plants and communication centers and supply depots. The aliens preferred to fight ship-to-ship battles in empty space, like some kind of gentleman's duel. Humans preferred to win quickly and completely. More aliens spoke, each one adding their voice to the growing demand for human surrender. They talked about orbital bombardments and surprise attacks and broken treaties. They talked about human cruelty and human savagery and human dishonor. Sarah listened to all of it and kept taking notes. She noted which species seemed most angry and which seemed most afraid. She noted which ones had suffered real losses to human forces and which ones were just repeating what they had heard from others. She noted which ones might be willing to negotiate, and which ones wanted total war. The tree-like alien with too many eyes spoke again. "We must face the truth," it said in a voice like rustling leaves. "Humans cannot be reasoned with. They cannot be bargained with. They only understand violence. So we must speak to them in the only language they know. The galaxy must act as one," Click Click said, clanking his metal plates together like armor. "No single species can stand against human tactics. But together, we have thousands of ships and millions of soldiers. Together, we can force them to surrender." Sarah knew the aliens were wrong about their military advantage, but she did not correct them. Human intelligence had counted their ships and analyzed their weapons and tactics. The aliens had numbers, but humans had better technology and better strategies. More importantly, humans had something the aliens did not have: the willingness to sacrifice everything to protect their own. People. Council Prime Yathara raised one thin hand for silence. The chamber became quiet except for the soft humming of the life support systems and the gentle chiming of the Zeridians. "We have heard all voices," Yathara said. "Now we will vote. The question before us is simple. Should the galaxy deliver an ultimatum to humanity, demanding their immediate surrender and compliance with galactic law?" Sarah watched as the votes came in. Each species had one vote, regardless of size or military power. It was supposed to be fair, but Sarah knew it was really designed to let the older, more established species control the younger ones. The Vorthek voted yes. The Zeridians chimed their agreement. The Hegemony voted yes. The Mantoid Confederacy voted yes. One by one, each species added their voice to the demand for human surrender. When the voting was finished, the result was unanimous. 12 species, 12 votes for the ultimatum. Yathara looked directly at Sarah. The Galactic Council has spoken with one voice. Humanity has 72 hours to comply with our demands. You will cease all military operations. You will withdraw from all contested worlds. You will accept galactic oversight of your expansion. You will pay reparations for the damage you have caused. Sarah nodded politely but said nothing. Furthermore, Yathara continued, humanity will turn over all personnel responsible for war crimes to galactic justice. You will accept limitations on your military technology and ship construction. You will allow galactic observers on all human worlds to ensure compliance. Sarah made another note on her datapad. The demands were even worse than she had expected. The aliens were not just asking for surrender. They were asking for humanity to become a client species, controlled and monitored by their former enemies. Click stood up again, his metal plates gleaming under the lights. If humanity refuses these reasonable demands, the galaxy will have no choice but to use force. We have the largest combined fleet in galactic history. We have weapons that can crack planets and technologies that can block out stars. Humanity cannot stand against the might of 12 civilized species working together. The threat was clear. Surrender or be destroyed. Yathara's black eyes never left Sarah's face. The human representative will now respond to these demands. The galaxy is listening. Sarah closed her datapad and stood up slowly. The massive chamber fell completely silent. Even the Zeridians stopped their soft chiming. 12 species, representing billions of beings across hundreds of worlds, waited to hear what humanity would say. Sarah looked around the chamber one more time, meeting the eyes or optical sensors or whatever each species used for sight. She had spent 4 days listening to their threats and their demands and their complaints. She had learned everything she needed to know about their military forces and their homeworlds and their weaknesses. Now it was time to show them what they had missed about humanity. Now it was time to speak. Sarah Chun stood in the center of the great chamber. The silence was so complete that she could hear the soft humming of the air recyclers and the distant vibration of the station's engines. 12 pairs of alien eyes watched her, waiting for humanity's response to their ultimatum. She was not a tall woman, barely 5.5 feet, and she looked even smaller in the massive space. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore a plain gray uniform with no decorations or medals. Compared to the elaborate forms and colorful displays of the alien representatives, she looked ordinary and unremarkable. That was exactly what she wanted them to think. Sarah walked slowly to the center podium where Council Prime Yathara had delivered the ultimatum. Her footsteps echoed in the silence. Each step was measured and calm, like she was walking to a business meeting instead of delivering humanity's response to a declaration of war. She reached the podium and looked up at the recording devices that would carry her words to every corner of the galaxy. Billions of beings on hundreds of worlds would hear what she said next. Human colonies would be listening. Alien governments would be analyzing every word. Military commanders would be preparing their responses. Sarah placed her hands on the podium and looked around the chamber one more time. She met the compound eyes of the Mantoid representative. She looked at the crystal formations that made up the Zeridian delegate. She stared directly at the black metal plates of the Vorthek war leader who had demanded human surrender. Then she spoke. "You have 3 of our worlds," Sarah said in a clear, calm voice. "We have a list of 300 of yours. You have 72 hours. The words carried through the translation systems to every species in the chamber. For a moment, nobody moved, nobody breathed. The silence stretched out like a wire pulled tight. Ready to snap. Then the chamber exploded into noise and motion. Click Click was the first to react. The Vorthak war leader jumped to his feet with a crash of metal plates and pointed all four of his arms at Sarah. Threat, he shouted, his voice grinding like broken gears. The primitive makes threats against civilized worlds. The tree-like alien with too many eyes swayed back and forth, its leaves rustling with agitation. Impossible, it said in its wind voice. They do not have the ships. They do not have the weapons. They cannot threaten 300 worlds. The spider-like Skranth representative reared up on his hind legs, his front claws clicking together. It is a bluff, he hissed. Humans are primitive. They barely have faster than light travel. They cannot project force across the galaxy. But Sarah was not finished. She reached into her uniform pocket and pulled out a small data chip, the kind that could hold the entire contents of a library or the complete plans for a starship. She placed it carefully on the podium where everyone could see it. The coordinates are all there, she said in the same calm voice. Military installations, government centers, orbital shipyards, defense platforms, communication hubs, population centers if you make us target them. The noise in the chamber grew louder. Representatives were shouting in their own languages, their translators struggling to keep up. Some were demanding explanations, others were calling for Sarah to be arrested. A few were already reaching for their communication devices to warn. Their homeworlds, Kethver of the hegemony stood up slowly, his blue face pale with shock. You cannot have that information, he said. Our military installations are classified at the highest levels. Our defense plans are known only to our War Council. Sarah looked directly at him. Nexus Station, Hegemony Space, Sector 7, she sighed. 43 heavy cruisers, 18 dreadnoughts, 6 orbital weapons platforms, Admiral Krevder commanding. Current shield rotation frequency 2.7 terahertz. Weakness in the lower port quadrant where you installed the new quantum sensors last month. Kethver's mouth fell open. The information Sarah had just recited was so secret that only a handful of beings in the entire hegemony knew it. And she had rattled it off like she was reading from a grocery list. The Vorthik Third Fleet, Sarah continued, turning to Click Click, anchored at Forge World Gamma. 87 ships total. Your new armor plating has a resonance frequency that makes it vulnerable to subsonic charges. Your crews rotate shifts every 18 hours, leaving a 12-minute gap in full readiness at 0300 station time. Click Click's metal plates were clanking together so fast they sounded like machine gun fire. How? He demanded. How do you know this? Sarah did not answer. Instead, she continued down the list. Zeridian Crystal Farms on Harmony 7. Your communication network routes through 17 relay stations. Take out stations 4, 7, and 12, and you lose contact with 30% of your fleet. The crystal beings were chiming in discord now, their beautiful sounds turned harsh and frightening. One of them tried to speak, but only produced a sound like breaking glass. Mantoid hive ships, Sarah said, looking at the praying mantis representative. Your queens coordinate fleet movements through pheromone broadcasts. Disrupt the chemical signals and your ships become confused and scattered. The disruption frequency is stop. Threx the mantoid screeched, his head darting back and forth in panic. Stop saying these things? But Sarah was not done. She continued around the chamber, species by species, revealing classified information. That should have been impossible for humans to know. Ship positions, weapon specifications, command codes, strategic weaknesses. She spoke about supply routes and communication protocols and the personal habits of alien. Military commanders. Council Prime Yathara had not moved during the entire recitation. She sat in her chair like a statue, her black eyes fixed on Sarah's face. When Sarah finally stopped talking, the ancient eldest representative spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. How long? She asked. How long what? Sarah replied. How long have you been watching us? Sarah picked up the data chip from the podium and held it between two fingers. Since before we met you, she said. We learned to be careful when we found out we were not alone in the galaxy. We learned to watch and listen and prepare. We learned that information is the best weapon. The chamber had gone quiet again, but it was a different kind of silence now. Not the expectant quiet of beings waiting for a speech, but the stunned silence of beings who had just realized they had made a terrible mistake. "You think we are primitive," Sarah said. "You think we fight without honor or intelligence? You think we are savages who only know how to destroy things?" She held up the data chip. "But we know where your children go to school. We know which of your leaders are sick and which ones are corrupt. We know how to turn off your power grids and how to jam your communications and how to make your own weapons turn against you." Click Click was still making noise, but it was not angry shouting anymore. It was the sound of someone who was very, very afraid. "You cannot attack 300 worlds," he said, but his voice was smaller now. "You do not have enough ships." Sarah smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. It was not a nice smile. "We do not need ships," she said. "We have something better. We have patience and preparation and the willingness to do whatever it takes to protect our people." She placed the data chip back on the podium and stepped away from it. "That chip contains targeting information for 300 worlds across 12 species. Military targets, infrastructure, government buildings. Everything you need to know that your homes are not as safe as you thought they were." The aliens were all talking at once now, but Sarah ignored them. She walked back to her simple human chair and sat down. She folded her hands in her lap and waited. "The terms are simple," she said when the noise died down. "You have 3 of our worlds, New Shanghai, Kepler Prime, and Ross Station. You have 72 hours to give them back and withdraw all military forces from human space. And if we refuse?" Yathara asked. Sarah's smile became even less pleasant. "Then you will learn why we fight the way we do." She stood up and walked toward the chamber exit. At the doorway, she turned back to look at the 12 alien representatives one last time. 72 hours, she repeated. Then she left the chamber, leaving behind the data chip and 300 very worried alien civilizations. The first attack came exactly 60 hours after Sarah Chun left the chamber. Admiral Krefter was reviewing defense reports on the bridge of his flagship when the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in 3 seconds later, bathing the hegemony dreadnought in red light. His communications officer turned to him with wide, frightened eyes. "Sir," the officer said, his blue skin even paler than usual. "We have lost contact with Nexus Station." "What do you mean, lost contact?" Krefter demanded. "Sir, the station is gone." "Not destroyed? Gone? It was there, and then it was not there?" Krefter stared at the main screen, where Nexus Station had been floating in space just moments before. There was now nothing but empty vacuum and drifting debris. The massive orbital defense platform that had protected hegemony space for 200 years had simply vanished. "How is that possible?" Krefter whispered. His answer came in the form of more reports flooding in from across hegemony space. Defense. Platforms going dark, communication arrays falling silent, shipyards losing power. Military bases reporting that their weapon systems had stopped working. The attacks were not random. Each target was chosen with surgical precision to cause maximum disruption with minimum loss of life. Power plants shut down, but the backup systems for hospitals and schools kept working. Military communication networks went dead but civilian. Channels stayed open. Orbital weapons platforms lost power, but the life support systems for their crews remained functional on Vorthek Prime. Click Click received the worst news of his military career. The entire Third Fleet had been disabled in less than 10 minutes. Not destroyed, disabled. Every ship was still intact, but none of them could move or fight or communicate. "Explain this to me," Click Click demanded, his metal plates clanking. With rage and fear, how does an entire fleet become useless in 10 minutes? His intelligence officer, a smaller Vorthak with newer, shinier plates, consulted his data screen. "Sir, it appears that someone introduced a computer virus into our navigation systems. The virus spread through the fleet network and infected Every ship simultaneously. All weapon systems, engines, and communications are locked out. A computer virus? Click-Click's voice ground like broken stone. From who? The humans do not have the technology to penetrate our networks. Sir, the intelligence officer said quietly, the virus signature indicates it has been in our systems for over 2 years, waiting. Click-Click felt something he had never experienced before. Cold fear ran through his metal body like electricity. The humans had been inside Vorthak military networks for 2 years, watching and waiting and preparing. They could have done this at any time, but they had held back until now. On Zeridian Prime, the crystal beings were experiencing their own nightmare. Their beautiful communication network, which had connected every Zeridian world for thousands of years, was playing the same message over and over again. This is a demonstration, the human voice said in perfect Zeridian harmonic tones. Your communication network belongs to us now. Your defense grid belongs to us now. Your orbital shipyards belong to us now. We can turn them off whenever we choose. We can turn them back on when you return our worlds. The message was not just insulting because it was a threat. It was insulting because the human was speaking perfect Zeridian, a language that took most beings decades to learn. The harmonics were so precise that the message actually sounded beautiful, even while it was delivering threats of destruction across the galaxy. Similar scenes were playing out on hundreds of worlds. The Mantoid Confederacy watched helplessly as their hive ships lost the ability to coordinate with each other. The Skrenth Empire discovered that their stealth technology had been turned against them, making their own ships invisible to their own sensors. The tree beings found that their orbital forests were receiving new growth instructions that would turn their food crops into decorative flowers. Every attack was perfectly targeted and perfectly timed. The humans were not just demonstrating their reach, they were showing exactly how much they had learned about each species. They knew which targets would cause panic and which would cause anger. They knew how to hurt military capabilities without harming civilians. They knew how to send a message that could not be ignored. On Earth, President Martinez sat in the Situation Room deep beneath the Capitol, watching reports come in from across human space. The room was filled with military officers and intelligence analysts, all of them focused on screens showing the results of Operation Watchful Eye. Status report, the president said. General Harrison, head of Human Space Command, consulted his tablet. All primary targets have been neutralized. Alien military capability in the target zones has been reduced by an average of 73%. No civilian casualties reported. Our agents report that alien governments are in emergency session across the galaxy. And our worlds? New Shanghai, Kepler Prime, and Ross Station are still under alien occupation, but our people are safe. The aliens have not retaliated against the civilian populations. President Martinez nodded. That was important. The plan only worked if the aliens understood that humans could target military assets without harming innocent people. It was a demonstration of precision and restraint, not mindless destruction. How long until the 72-hour deadline? Martinez asked. 11 hours and 37 minutes, sir. Martinez looked at the displays showing the locations of human ships throughout the galaxy. They were not many compared to the alien fleets, but they were positioned exactly where they needed to be. Years of planning and preparation had led to this moment. And if they do not withdraw, General Harrison's expression was grim, then we move to Phase 2, sir. And after that, there will be no going back. Back on Nexus Prime Station, the Galactic Council was meeting in emergency session. The great chamber was filled with the sound of angry voices and frightened arguments. Representatives were shouting at each other in a dozen different languages, while their translators struggled to keep up. Council Prime Yathara sat in her chair like a statue, her black eyes staring at the empty human seat. The data chip that Sarah Chun had left behind was still sitting on the central podium, but now it looked different. Before, it had seemed like a small, harmless object. Now it looked like a bomb that had already exploded. We must respond. Click-Click was shouting, his metal plates creating a constant racket. We cannot allow primitives to attack civilized worlds. With what? Kethver snapped back. Half our fleet is offline. Our defense networks are compromised. Our communication systems are playing human propaganda? The Skrenth representative was, pacing back and forth on his 6 legs, his movements quick and agitated. This is impossible, he kept saying. Humans do not have this technology. They do not have these capabilities. Clearly they do, said the tree being, its many eyes blinking, in different rhythms. The question is not how they got these capabilities. The question is what we do now. Threx the mantoid was clicking his claws together nervously. My hive queens are in chaos, he said. Without proper coordination, our fleets are scattered and confused. It will take days to re-establish proper command structure. We still have time, Yathara said quietly. Her soft voice cut through the noise and argument like a knife. The humans gave us 72 hours. We still have 11 hours to decide. Decide what? Click Click demanded. Whether to surrender to primitives. Decide whether to save lives, Yathara replied. Theirs and ours. The chamber fell silent. Everyone understood what she meant. The attacks so far had been demonstrations, carefully designed to disable rather than destroy. But if the aliens refused to withdraw from human worlds, the next phase would be different. The humans had shown they could reach any target in the galaxy. The question was whether they would be as careful about civilian casualties if pushed. Too far. We need more information, Kethver said. We need to understand how they did this. We need to know what other capabilities they have. We need to contact our homeworlds, the Skrenth representative added. We need to assess the damage and determine our military options. But Yathara was shaking her head. We need to do what? The humans asked, she said. We need to withdraw from their worlds and hope they are willing to talk. The argument that followed was fierce and desperate. Some representatives wanted to fight, convinced that the galaxy could not surrender to a single primitive species. Others wanted to negotiate, afraid of what the humans might do next. A few wanted to ask for help from species not represented on the council. As the hours ticked by, reports continued to arrive from across the galaxy, more military installations going dark, more defense networks failing, more demonstrations of human reach and human precision, and with each report the terrible truth became clearer. The humans had not been lucky or desperate when they delivered their ultimatum. They had been prepared. They had been ready for this moment for years, maybe. Decades. The galaxy had underestimated humanity. And now they were learning the price of that mistake. The countdown continued. 10 hours. 9 hours. 8 hours. And somewhere in human space, 3 worlds full of human civilians waited to see if their governments had chosen correctly. If their sacrifice would be worthwhile. If their people would come home. The clock kept ticking toward the deadline that would change everything. The attacks stopped as suddenly as they had begun, across 300 worlds. Alien military commanders stared at their screens in confusion as their systems came back online. Power grids hummed to life. Communication networks cleared of interference. Weapons platforms resumed normal operations. It was as if someone had flipped a switch and returned everything to normal. But nothing was normal anymore on Hegemony Prime. Admiral Krevder watched his tactical display flicker back to full function. His ships were responding to commands again. His weapons were armed and ready. His defense platform showed green across the board. Everything worked perfectly, just like it had before the humans turned it all off. That was the most frightening part. The humans had not broken anything. They had simply turned it off for a while, like parents taking away a child's toys. They had demonstrated complete control over alien military technology, then given it back as if to say, we could have kept this, but we chose not to. Krevder, as communication officer, looked up from his station. Sir, we are receiving a message from the human fleet. Put it through, Krevder said. The main screen flickered, and the face of a human appeared. It was not Sarah Chun this time, but a middle-aged man with gray hair and calm eyes. He wore a simple blue uniform with no decorations. This is Admiral Thompson of the Human Space Navy, the man said. I am transmitting from the cruiser Determination, currently holding position at the edge of your system. I am here to escort your forces away from human worlds. Krevder felt his mouth go dry. Human ships? In hegemony space? Impossible. Our sensors would have detected— Your sensors did detect us, Admiral Thompson interrupted gently, 3 days ago. But your computers were programmed to ignore the readings and classify them as background radiation. We have been here the entire time, watching and waiting. The hegemony admiral stared at the screen in disbelief. Human ships had been sitting in his own star system for 3 days, invisible to his forces not because of advanced stealth technology, but because they had hacked his sensors to ignore them. Your orders are simple, Thompson continued. Withdraw all forces from New Shanghai within the next 6 hours. Your ships will be escorted to the edge of human space and released unharmed. Any attempt to resist or delay will result in the immediate resumption of our demonstration. Krevder wanted to argue, wanted to fight, wanted to do something that would salvage his pride and the honor of the hegemony. But he looked at his tactical display and saw the truth. His fleet was still offline in any way that mattered. The humans had proven they could disable his ships whenever they wanted. Fighting would not be a battle, it would be a massacre. Understood, he said finally, we will comply. Similar conversations were taking place across the galaxy. On Vorthak Prime, Click received his orders from a human captain who spoke fluent Vorthak military protocol. On Zeridian worlds, crystal beings heard human voices singing their demands in perfect harmonic resonance. On Mantoid hive ships, human commanders delivered instructions using proper pheromone-enhanced communication. The message was always the same: withdraw from human worlds immediately, and no one would be harmed. Most alien commanders chose to obey. A few tried to resist. The Skrenth battle group at Ross Station decided to make a stand. Their commander, a proud warrior named Zethkar, refused to retreat from a primitive species. He ordered his ships to attack the moment they detected human vessels. The battle lasted exactly 17 minutes. The human ships did not return fire in the traditional sense. Instead, they used the same technology that had disabled the Skrenth weapons to turn them against each other. Skrenth vessels found themselves firing on their own allies. Navigation systems sent ships crashing into asteroids. Life support systems began playing human music instead of providing breathable atmosphere. When it was over, not a single Skrenth ship had been destroyed by human weapons. They had all been disabled by their own systems, turned against them by human computer viruses and software exploits. The crews were alive but helpless, drifting in space and waiting for rescue. Zethkar's flagship received a personal message from the human fleet commander: your ships will be towed to the edge of the system and released. Your crews will be given food and medical supplies for the journey home. Next time, please consider the consequences before choosing violence. The message was delivered in perfect Skrenth, complete with the proper military honorifics and respect terms. It was polite, professional, and absolutely terrifying. Back on Nexus Prime, the Galactic Council watched the reports come in with growing amazement and fear. The humans were not just winning. They were winning without killing anyone. Every alien force that had tried to resist had been defeated completely, but the casualty reports showed 0 deaths and minimal injuries. They are hurting us, Yathara said quietly, like livestock. Kethver nodded, his blue face pale with shock. They could have destroyed our fleets. They could have killed millions, but they chose not to. Why? Because they are not monsters, said a new voice. Everyone turned to see Sarah Chun walking back into the chamber. She looked exactly the same as when she had left, calm, composed, and completely in control. She walked to her simple chair and sat down, folding her hands in her lap. You came back, Yathara observed. I said I would, Sarah replied. The 72 hours are up. Your forces are withdrawing from our worlds. It is time to talk about what happens next. Click stood up with his usual clanking of metal plates, but his voice was smaller than before. What do you want? He asked. The same thing we have always wanted, Sarah said. To be left alone to grow and develop in peace. To explore the galaxy without interference. to trade with those who want to trade with us, and to defend ourselves against those who want to harm us. And if we agree to this, Frex the Mantoid asked, what guarantee do we have that you will not use these capabilities against us again? Sarah smiled, but it was not the cold, threatening smile she had shown before. This was warmer, more genuine. You have our word, she said. But more than that, you have seen what we can do. If we wanted to conquer the galaxy, we could have done it already. We do not want conquest, we want peace. You destroyed our military capabilities, the tree being said, its many eyes blinking rapidly. How do we know you will not do it again? We did not destroy anything, Sarah corrected. We turned things off for a while. Everything is working again now, is it not? We could have caused permanent damage, but we chose not to. We could have targeted civilian populations, but we chose not to. We could have killed your soldiers and crews, but we chose not to. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of each representative. We showed you exactly what we could do, then we stopped. That is not the behavior of a species that wants to rule the galaxy. That is the behavior of a species that wants to be respected. Council Prime Yathara leaned forward in her chair. What are your terms? Simple, Sarah said. Recognition of human sovereignty over our current territory. Non-interference in human expansion into unclaimed systems. Trade agreements for mutual benefit. And most importantly, a guarantee that this council will never again attempt to dictate terms to humanity. And in return, we will share some of our technology with you, not the military applications, but the beneficial ones. Medical advances, agricultural improvements, communication enhancements. We will also provide security assistance to any species that requests it, as long as they are not trying to harm us or our allies. The chamber was quiet for a long moment. The representatives looked at each other, communicating in the subtle ways that diplomats used when they needed to make decisions quickly. Finally, Yathara spoke. The Galactic Council accepts these terms, she said. We recognize human sovereignty and welcome humanity as an equal member of the galactic community. One by one, the other representatives voiced their agreement. Even Click-Click, despite his wounded pride, nodded his metal head in acceptance. Sarah stood up and walked to the central podium. She picked up the data chip she had left there and slipped it back into her pocket. There is one more thing, she said. The information on that chip and all the other intelligence we have gathered will remain classified. We will not share your military secrets with your enemies or use them for blackmail. What happened here was a demonstration, not the beginning of a campaign of terror. She turned to leave, then paused at the chamber door. The galaxy is big enough for all of us, she said. But it is not big enough for anyone to think they can threaten humanity without consequences. Remember that, and we will have a long and peaceful relationship. Sarah Chun walked out of the chamber for the second time. But this time she was not delivering threats. She was leaving as the representative of the galaxy's newest major power, a species that had earned its place not through conquest, but through the careful application of intelligence, patience, and overwhelming preparedness, the Galactic War. Council had learned a lesson they would never forget. Sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one who speaks only once, but chooses their words very, very carefully, and in human space 3 worlds celebrated as their people came home, knowing that their sacrifice had not been in vain. Humanity had found its place among the stars, and it would never be underestimated again.